Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Head to youtube.com. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button for Locked On Sports Atlanta. 3,000 subscribers. Appreciate you all so much for being a part of our growing community. Free and available on all of your favorite podcast platforms, including Spotify and Odyssey. Leave us a 5-star review, and then hit me up on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Today's show is brought to you by our great friends over at Coffee AM, coffeeam.com. You know, they have the best small batch coffee roaster in America, local right here to Georgia, up in Canton. You know how much I love these folks. I drink their coffee every single day. You're looking for organic, you're looking for flavored coffee, you need K-Cups, whatever it is that you need, head to coffeeam.com. And here's what we got going on. If you head to coffeeam.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON, go there, take a look at their extensive menu of coffees, teas, and gift sets. When you get that first order put together, get to the checkout, put the coupon code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON. Put that coupon code at the checkout. Get 15% off that first order. Coffeeam.com is the best small batch coffee roaster in America. We welcome into the show the man who covers all things Atlanta Falcons for ESPN. ESPN.com is where you can check out all of his work. My buddy Mike Rothstein is joining us here. Of course, you can always follow Mike on his personal Twitter page at Mike Rothstein. And Mike, it was a successful Friday night. Look, say what you will. I understand it's preseason. But for a team that's not used to winning at this time of the year, we'll take whatever we can get.
I guess. By the way, that was the longest read I think I've ever heard. I just want to start there. As somebody who has to do reads occasionally also, that was a long read. I sat through a lot there. I talked about it a little bit on my podcast, which is called From the Perch. You should download and subscribe to that as well a little bit today. And what you saw on Friday night was a good first step, but understand this. Everything that you see in the preseason, especially from starters in preseason one when they played all of one series, take it with a grain of salt. Like, you have to. You can get excited all you want, and that's great. And Desmond Ridder looked good despite the numbers. Like, you know, there were 4 drops and 1 designed thrown pass out of bounds. And so those numbers would have been a little bit better, even if, say, half those balls were caught. It's above 50%. You know, almost trending towards 60%. So you look at that and you say, okay, that's good, but understand that mostly came against backups, not starters. But I thought the seeds were there for Desmond Ridder to grow, and it was a good development point for Desmond Ridder. The coaches seem to believe that. Desmond Ridder seemed to believe that. I thought that there were a lot of positives to take from it, but again, take it with a grain of salt, right? Like, their defense, also in the negative vein too. I mean, their defense got shredded by the Lions starters, but you don't get too concerned about that yet either because, again, 1 drive, not scheming, not rushing. You had Quentin Bell in there for part of that, and I don't anticipate Quentin Bell being a starter for the Falcons, for instance. You know, you figure Arnold Ebiketie is probably going to be in that rotation. They hope D'Angelo Malone will be in the rotation at edge rusher. So I look at some of that and I say, yeah, sure, they look good. Fun game, entertaining preseason game, which is better than the majority of preseason games I've watched between Detroit and Atlanta, the 2 cities that I have worked in covering the NFL. But I wasn't getting too excited one way or another based off of what I saw, just because of the reality of the small sample size, I would say, that's out there.
So obviously about half the rushing yards came from the 2 quarterbacks, and obviously it's a different dimension than what Matt Ryan brought. But realistically, how much do you think Arthur Smith is going to incorporate that aspect of his quarterbacks being able to run in the actual offense itself?
Well, I mean, certainly more than last year. Like, that's a given, right? Because both those guys have those skill sets. But don't forget, too, this can offer, even if it's not strict running where they take off and they scramble, offers more opportunity for designed rollouts, for designed bootlegs, which have run pass option to it potentially. Like, there's a lot more unpredictability when you've got a quarterback that you know can take off. And I thought Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder both looked good running the ball on Friday night. Now, again, you probably don't want to see Mariota take some of the hits that he took. That, to me, was another thing. Like, we're talking about what you looked at positive and negative. Slide, man. Like, seriously. Like, you've been in the league long enough. Like, just slide. You don't need to be taking those hits in week 1 of the preseason. Like, I get you maybe want to prove something, but you don't have anything to prove. You have the starting job right now. Like, that's not going to get taken away from you necessarily if you slide. Like, Arthur Smith's not going to penalize you there. So I look at it and I say, okay, that is something that we all knew they were going to add dimensionally to the offense. And I think there's so much that can happen there because all of a sudden RPO becomes a lot more threatening. You do have the threat of a designed run for a quarterback, which, again, things that you didn't have last year. And I think that opens things up for the running backs and maybe makes life easier for the wide receivers and the tight ends as well. Though one group of people that might struggle a little more with it now are the offensive linemen, because you don't necessarily always know where your quarterback's going to be, but you get used to it. And, I've talked to offensive linemen who've had mobile quarterbacks before, and they've all said that, like, you figure it out and you just become accustomed to it.
So let's talk about the offensive line for a minute. And obviously there's the meme going around. You saw Jalen Mayfield, dropping down. He's laying on the ground. I mean,
I thought he had a good game, John. I do. I thought against backups, he had a good game, man. Like, and I've been hard on Jalen Mayfield throughout camp. I mean, he's struggled until he took a couple of days off to fix that back injury. And we don't know how much that back was really affecting him that first 10 days of camp or so, right? But I thought, again, against backups, again, small sample size, although we played a lot of snaps, I thought he looked okay. I don't think he's unseating Elijah Wilkinson tomorrow, but I thought that there was, again, promise there after a really rough start to camp.
What do you think we learned about the center battle? What do you think about Caleb McGarry? What did we kind of learn about those couple of positions that we know are sort of up for grabs, if you will?
All right. So here's the first thing, right? Let's be honest. Right tackle's not up for grabs. It's not. I know everybody wants it to be like, that's the big thing. But Caleb McGarry has literally taken every first team rep all camp. He has. So maybe eventually they'll give Jermaine Afidi a shot if they don't like what they see. Or maybe they just get him in there a little bit to get him some work next to Chris Lindstrom, just in case. But right now it feels, for all intents and purposes, like Caleb McGarry is the guy at right tackle. Now, there's still 3 weeks. That obviously can change. You've got 2 sets of joint practices, 2 more preseason games. I'll be surprised if we see starters much in like preseason 3, especially because you've got preseason 2 and preseason 3, the Monday night game and then a Saturday game. Like, I don't think you're going to be doing that to starters. There's no need to do that, in my opinion. So we'll see how Arthur Smith handles that. But I think McGarry has had a good camp. Center is wide open right now. You looked at it yesterday. Drew Dahlman was the center yesterday. We'll see what happens tonight at the open practice. They've legitimately been rotating it day by day. I think both guys have had their strong moments. Both guys have had their weak moments. And I think that they're going to roll with it until they figure out who they want there. Now, do I think they're going to play rotating centers in week 1? And we saw that a little bit last season. No, I don't think that's certainly not ideal. And at some point you have to make a decision if you're Arthur Smith. And if they're that close, you just got to pick a guy. And I don't know who they would pick in that situation. Drew Dahlman is their draft pick. So they have a little bit more invested there as Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith. But Matt Hennessy's only, not that much older. So if you think Hennessy's the guy, you go with Hennessy, and Dahlman becomes your top backup at center and maybe even your top backup at guard too, along with Jalen Mayfield, that they can kind of battle that out for that sixth lineman or the fourth interior lineman spot. So those are things that I think you're still looking at, but to me, that's still a toss-up. It's frankly probably the only true toss-up as of this moment on the roster where only one guy will really play. Like, there's still questions at running back, at receiver, et cetera, et cetera.
So let's talk about receiver. Drake London goes out with a knee injury. We heard from Arthur saying that he probably won't be back this week, which is fine. But how kind of frustrating is it? I mean, obviously they want to get all of these young guys in the mix and things like that. You expect that we'll see him by the 3rd preseason game?
I would not play Drake. Drake to me, you don't need to play Drake London until week 1 of the regular season. Like, you don't. You saw he got a little bit of a taste. You've seen what he can do in practices. Ideally, if you can get him back for joints against Jacksonville and get him a little bit of work there, great. But you don't need to put him out there in a third preseason game, especially if, and I don't know whether Arthur's going to play any starters or not in that third preseason game, but why would you? Because let's for argument's sake, and we don't know the exact extent of this injury, but let's say he got hurt in preseason 3. Well, then all of a sudden you're in danger of week 1 or not being fully ready for week 1. That's what matters. I don't care what anyone says. The reality is this. The number one goal of preseason is to get out of preseason healthy. That is it. Like, as long as unless you're fighting for a job. You know, if you're back into the roster guy, it's a different conversation. But if you're a starter, if you're a locked-in starter, like Drake London, like Kyle Pitts, your whole goal, Cordero Patterson, get to week 1 healthy. Like, so whatever you have to do to get there, that's what you do. So if I'm the Falcons, I'm very cautious with Drake London. I don't mess around with it. And if you listen between the lines of what Arthur Smith said on Sunday, when he said he's had a really good camp, he got a taste, we're going to be cautious. Like, to me, that is very much, hey, stick with Drake London, put him in bubble wrap, see him in week 1, at least for games.
Last question for you, Mike. Do you expect Franks to get any run at quarterback in the preseason, and can he make the 53?
I do think he'll get some run at some point at quarterback, yes. Just if for nothing else than to get him some reps there and maybe get the Falcons out of a game if they need to. And in terms of does he make the 53? Yeah, I think he does. I think he's an intriguing option in multiple spots. I think if you expose him to waivers, someone might take a chance on him. You've seen it with Logan Thomas when he made his conversion, seen it with some other guys. So to me, yeah, I think there's absolutely a pretty good chance that Felipe Franks is on this 53-man roster.
Mike Rothstein covers the Atlanta Falcons for ESPN. ESPN.com is where you check out his work. Tell us again where the podcast is, Mike.
Yeah, the podcast is From the Perch, Spotify, Apple, really wherever you listen to podcasts, we're there. So come hang out, download, subscribe. We've been going every day during training camp, and we'll go back to twice weekly once the season starts.
And follow him on his Twitter page at Mike Rothstein. Mike, appreciate it, buddy. Thanks for a few minutes.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
You got it. We'll be back. Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery.